I think what happens with Moby Dick is it pulls a lot of stuff into its gravitational field, if you want to, because it's rather large. And so it could pull things into its gravitational field. And so there was a book that Janet actually was reading to me, speaking of how you get access to things. Janet has been nice enough to read me parts of the book. And we found it in a used bookstore, and it's called The Bird Watcher in the Shetlands. And so it's a book about bird watching, and you wouldn't think about maybe trying to make connections between thinking about a book from 1905 about bird watching and a book from, what do you call it, 1851? About killing whales. And yet if you really think about it, there might be some interesting connections about the way we come up against what we call the natural world, parenthetically, as if we weren't part of it.
Right, yeah.
As if you had to go somewhere else to find it.
Yeah. Well,
but those are whole other issues.
True.
Anyway, so what I was thinking, the thing when I looked up Mr. Salas in Wikipedia, I found out that he had this really interesting family history, that his older brother, I think Frederick, who was 6 years older, was a very charismatic big game hunter in Africa. I don't want to demonize him. He's also considered to be a naturalist, a conservationist, and in many ways, and also a good writer.
Yeah.
But he would go out there and stalk and kill elephants, and then send their skeletons, or maybe the whole guy, back to museums where they'd be studied. And to use Wordsworth's wonderful phrase in a poem that I can't identify, we murder to dissect. An incredible line, isn't it? We murder to dissect is one way of looking at what scientists do.
Yeah. And
And
it feels that way when you're reading the cetology chapters. In a way, there's some murder going on.
There's a lot of murder going on, and yet I don't think that Melville always saw it that way. The thing that I think is that Melville is kind of like the older. Ooh, now it's talking. It doesn't want to be silent. It doesn't want to be silent forever. Tell you what, I'm going to get it to pipe down by changing the. I just turned off the speaker.
You can get a couple words in. It's okay.
Edgewise. Okay. Anyway, so the younger brother, I don't think I said that on this particular card, the younger brother basically deeply resented his very popular older brother and treated him like he was a child, a big child with a gun. And what Edmund said is, put down the gun. What you need to do is something that he called watching. And we tend to take the word bird watching for granted now. We even have a phrase called whale watching.
Yeah.
Interesting. Which I think is something that tourists do.
Yes,
maybe.
yeah.
You know, but anyway, the word watching I think wasn't as big back then as it would be now. And I think he was a pioneer in this concept of watching, you know.
Yeah.
And the idea is you don't kill them, go out where they are and just be really quiet and attentive and ask a lot of questions of yourself and write beautifully about it. And the thing, again, was I was thinking about these two Silas brothers who were a generation younger than in Melville. I thought, you know what? I think I can find both strains in Moby Dick. He didn't think killing whales was wrong. And it wasn't just to study them. He thought cutting them up for oil and using the oil for what you needed it for was fine. I think it's not problematized that much in the book, although he's got one wonderful passage in one of his chapters where he says, you know what? Maybe it is murder. And maybe killing an ox is murder, and maybe if people were being judged by a jury of oxen, they would be hanged. They'd be hanged. But I think ordinarily...
That is classic Melville irony.
It's so funny. He changes. I mean, the guy can change on a dime. You know, come to think of it, suppose the oxen were asking this question. How would they see it? But by and large, he didn't put himself in the position of an ox.
Right.
He thought it was fine to eat and enjoy animals.
He did make some comments about the declining numbers of whales also. In sort of like in that it was inevitable. I'm going to challenge you on this. I think there's a chapter where he says, "Will the whales decline?" But he comes up with, "No, they won't." Oh, okay. Janet, help me on this.
Yeah, I think that's right. That he speculates about whether they'll decline, but he concludes that they won't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like we'll never completely kill the whale, but it makes it sound like they're going to decline a lot. At least when I remember reading it. No, okay. I'm usually wrong with these.
But I'm going to challenge you on this. And Erin, as I explain to you, this is part of what I hope is my comic and not obnoxious persona.
No, it's all
judge.
good. You
guys can judge.
You can pick on me all you want. My lack of scholarship of how many whales. How we feel about the whales, how Melville feels about the declining numbers.
I feel that ordinarily, I think basically most of the time Melville thought that killing whales was fine, and that what the Nantucketers were doing was like admirable and should be celebrated.
I mean, it is very heroic, and it's in that heroic time. I mean, the Teddy Roosevelt kind of feeling about that was that it was very, gallant, and he needed to restore the national willpower, by
the moral equivalent of war. Although war was also pretty good for TR.
Right? Yeah. I know he didn't have to serve.
Yeah,
but he definitely, that was his.
It was manly.
It was manly
to. We're gonna get just some of this gender stuff at some point.
Yeah, here it's sneaking in.
Yeah,
it's funny though that we said that we have this point about the whether or not how Melville felt about the number of whales, because when I interviewed Barney Frank like very briefly the year that he did. Yes, it was the most unpleasant interview I've ever done in my life. He gave me about 2 seconds and he made me feel like about an inch tall, because I asked him sort of a general feeling about the book, and because he read the beginning, and that beginning part has like an inkling of a sort of political feel to it, because there's this, it's the one time that you're on land and you're dealing with land people, and I feel like Ishmael is sort of questioning humanity in some ways on land versus humanity on sea, and I just kind of wanted to ask him like how he felt, because there's like a couple jokes about like Afghanistan, and he was like, oh well, that's very like timely right now, and that Melville mentioned it, and I was sort of like, what do how do you think about this? And he sort of brushed that all off and was like, I don't think I don't come to any political conclusions. This is very diplomatic of him, but he was like, I just think it's a very important for us to reconnect with nature through it. But it's interesting because I think that connection with nature is not always in the way that a politician might. I mean, he's a politician, He's not a.
Well, the poor man has to live in Maine right now, so he's gonna have to connect with nature one way or the other.
Yeah.
The man he married lives in Maine, so he's just gonna have to connect to nature.
Yeah, he's gonna have to connect.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny though that he just had that one sort of aside, and it was this sort of like environmentalist sort of stance.
But the thing about using the phrase "connecting to nature" when you're talking about slaughtering whales, harpooning them, cutting them up, that's the part I want to say. Is that I think. One of the things about Melville is he was a man of his time. If you want to talk about fast fish and loose fish, the fast fish part of him is, yes, of course he was a man of his time. And back then, it was basically considered fine that we need oil for our lamps, and where are we going to get the oil?
Yeah.
The whale.
Right,
This is before the petroleum deposits were then exploited.
Exactly.
So I don't think he had any trouble about the idea that these animals are being killed. And yet, he also does.
And yet he does, yeah.
And yet he does. Because basically he feels that in order to really come up against the whale, you have to come up against it when it's living. That's what I think, the living whale. And I could go on and on about that part of it, that coming up against just its skeleton doesn't show you what it is.
Yes. Yeah.
But let me get back to the ethics of it. Is it okay to kill animals?
Right.
Yes, it is for him. I think he's a happy carnivore. I have to say I am too. Janet's a vegetarian, which I deeply respect.
Yeah,
I'm an uneasy carnivore, but I am a carnivore, and I don't think Melville was that uneasy at all, except in his references to the oxen wanting to revenge us.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost this kind of perspective. Well, if the oxen end up being on the jury, well, it looks like we're all going to hang.
Exactly.
It's
and
sort of
yeah. One of the things that I think is really worth looking at is a lot of the things that. I'm interested in the idea of underlining or bookmarking when we read Melville, because I just wonder how many people read it and have to do something active to their experience of the text.
Yeah.
And so I think the oxen thing is very underlinable. And so I think one of the things that can happen when you're a younger reader is you just assume that he meant every single thing, or that it's like a through philosophy, that if he said it in one part, then he probably meant it somewhere else, or that he didn't have like total ADHD.
Right. Yes.
Gee, did I really believe that back then? It sounded so good. And the critics that I like, now that I've read a whole lot of critics, are the ones that kind of get that feeling of, oh, he was revving himself up at the end of this chapter, so of course he's going to explode into something so philosophical and underlinable. But then there might be another chapter where he explodes into something that's really different. And it's the experience of him getting very enthusiastic. And so I think, do not be too misled by your own earmarkings, page dog earrings, if people still use pages. And